All right, so now we can finally start sampling. The Octatrack has two stereo inputs. There's input AB and there's input CD. The way I have this currently set up is coming into input AB is the output from another computer, and it happens to just be playing a bunch of royalty-free music from YouTube. Now, I don't hear anything coming through these inputs for a couple different reasons. One of them is because I'm not actually playing the audio that's going through, but another reason is because by default, the inputs here are not turned up for us to hear. If we want to hear what's coming through the inputs, we have to turn that up using the mixer. Before I do that, let me go ahead and I'm going to start playing this music on my other computer. All right, so I'm playing the music on my other computer, and we can see now above where it says AB, these LEDs are now flashing this weird kind of green-yellow color. This is basically indicating the volume level coming into the inputs. But again, we're not hearing anything. Now I want to make sure that I can hear this, and when I get ready to sample something from this input, I want to make sure that I'm on the appropriate track and recording into the appropriate track recorder. So before I even turn up the volume for inputs A and B, let me go to track 1, because again, my first 4 tracks are utilizing Flex machines. If I double tap track 1, I can see track 1 is linked to track recorder 1. So as soon as I record into track 1, it'll get recorded into this track buffer, and I can instantly start playing the sound before I ever save it. All right, so that's established. If I want to turn up the inputs for A and B, I have to go into the mixer. So we've been going into the project menu by holding function and pressing this project button. If I don't press function, this will bring me into the Octatrack mixer. So here I can see these knobs correspond to these different settings, and I see DIR for the top row, which is A and B, and then DIR for the bottom row, which is for input C and D. So if I want to hear what's coming into input A and B, I have to turn up the direct input, and this middle knob corresponds to that. All right, so we got this playing. I can hear it. I can see that this is coming into my Octatrack. Now, before I start to sample this, there's some very interesting stuff that happens in the beginning. This will be a cool thing for us to play with. But before I start to sample it, we need to look at the recording setup and make sure that we are ready to start recording something. To get into the record setup, I have to hold function and press either one of the record buttons. There's 2 different recording setup pages. If I hold function and press A and B, this brings me into recording 1 setup 1. We can determine which inputs we're going to sample from. So again, we can sample from input A and B. We can sample from input C and D. We can also resample from any other tracks on the Octatrack by using this source 3 button here. We're going to check that out a little bit later. But right now I know that I want to sample to inputs A and B. So this second knob will allow me to change the input for C and D to no input. All right, so I'm only going to sample from A and B. Now you have a few different options for how these inputs are going to get recorded. If it's set up like this, it's going to record A and B, and it's going to pan them hard left and hard right. If I keep scrolling through here, it'll just record the input from A. That'll just record the input from B. And with A plus B, it's going to record A and B and sum them together. So instead of panning them hard left and hard right, both channels will basically be summed into one stereo file. Now, I would rather have them panned hard left and hard right, so I'm going to go back here. This setting here, it says R length, so that's the recording length. If this is set to max, it's basically going to record until you tell it to stop. We can also tell it to record for a specific number of steps. This can be really useful if you're recording something that happens to be synced to the Octatrack, and you only want to record it for, again, a specific number of steps. With this set to 16, when I start recording, it'll record it for a length of 16 steps based on the tempo in my pattern. I'm going to leave this set to max for now because I don't know how long I want to record for, and the whole reason I enabled my dynamic recorders is so that I could record for as long as I want. Here we see it says trig, and this determines how I trigger the recording action. There's a few different options here. When this is set to 1, when I enable recording, I can enable recording by simply holding the record button here. And when I do that, you can see that little tape machine moves. Now, you see it's still moving even though I let go of the record button. If I press this again, it starts the recording over. And that's because the trig is set to 1. When I press this, it starts recording. I press it again, it starts the recording over. So let me stop that. The next option is 1, 2. With this option, when I press the record button, so I want to record in AB, I'm going to press the AB button. You can see the track recorder is recording. When I press this again, instead of starting over, it will stop. If I press it again now, it starts recording again. Now keep in mind, if you record over what you've recorded to a track recorder, what was recorded before gets overwritten. It's not going to keep on adding to what you previously recorded. So be careful about starting the recording process over if you have something that you like. The next option is the one that I personally prefer, which is hold. When hold is selected, it's only going to record for as long as you hold the button down. As soon as I let go, it stops recording. Now, all I've done is I've recorded a bunch of silence because I don't have the audio currently running. I'm going to start recording something in a bit. But before I do, we have the loop option here. So if you want to make it so that what you record is automatically set to loop, you can have this on. I don't really need this on, so I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to go to the second page of recording setup options. I'm going to hold function and press CD here. And here's our second page. Now here we have F in and F out. So basically we can either fade in the recording or fade it out. This can be useful if you want to record something that's going to loop and you want to avoid any sort of pops. Having a slight fade in at the beginning or a slight fade out could be helpful for that. Not really necessary for me. Below that we have Q record and QPL. So we can quantize when the recording starts, and we can also quantize how often we can trigger that sound when the sequence is playing. So again, these are really useful if you're recording things that are playing in sync with the Octatrack. And I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit later when we talk about MIDI. I'll record some stuff from my Novation circuit, and we'll be able to utilize these functions. The main thing I'm concerned with though right now, let me go back to my first recording page. I just want to sample some stuff into this track recorder. And once I have it, then I'll be able to freely edit it how I choose. So let me go back and start my music up again. I'm going to bring this back to the beginning. And I'll start recording. And to record, I'm just going to press this button to start recording. All right, I'm going to stop. I'm going to start recording again. I didn't realize this intro was so long. And here we go. We'll start from here. All right. So I recorded that. I stopped. Now I don't want to hit this again because if I do, it's going to record over what I just recorded into that track recorder. I'm going to go ahead and stop the music now. So now if I want to hear what I just recorded, I could either get out of my record mode. Let me hit exit. And this recording has been recorded to track 1. And if I double tap track 1, it's been recorded into that track recorder. We can see now where it says BPM, the tempo has changed. The default tempo for all the track recorders is 120 because that's the default tempo for the Octatrack. But we just recorded some new audio and Octatrack analyzed it and it's guessing that the tempo was 92 BPM. That may or may not be right, but the point is we have audio there. Now the whole point of assigning that track recorder to track 1 was so that I could start playing this as soon as I got the sample. Now I need to change the playback mode from slots back to tracks. So I'm going to hold function, press my up arrow and go back up to tracks. And now this trig will trigger whatever sample is in track 1. And that's what I just recorded. Now you might notice it's playing back a little bit faster than it was playing when I recorded it. And the reason why is because by default, this sample has been time stretched. Now we'll look at all that in just a second. We have the sample. Now we can start to edit this sample and look at some different parameters that will allow us to really manipulate it.